2. In the show windows, the lights came on, went out, according to the show. Through the slippery streets the crowd pressed on, as towards some unquestioned goal. A strange well-being, wroth and weary, filled the air. Close the eyes, and not a voice is heard, only the onward panting of the feet. In this throng silence they advanced as best they could at the edge of the sidewalk, Mercier in front, his hand on the handlebar, Camier behind, his hand on the saddle, and the bicycle slithered in the gutter by their side. "You hinder me more than you help me," said Mercier. "I'm not trying to help you," said Camier. "I'm trying to help myself." "Then all is well," said Mercier. "I'm cold," said Camier. It was indeed cold. "It is indeed cold," said Mercier. "Where do our feet think they're taking us?" said Camier. "They would seem to be heading for the canal," said Mercier. "Already?" said Camier. "Perhaps we shall be tempted," said Mercier, "to strike out along the towpath and follow it till boredom doth ensue. Before us, beckoning us on, without our having to lift our eyes, the dying tints we love so well." "Speak for yourself," said Camier. "The very water," said Mercier, "will linger livid, which is not to be despised either, and then the whim, who knows, may take us to throw ourselves in." "The little bridges slip by," said Camier, "ever fewer and farther between. We pore over the locks, trying to understand. From the barges made fast to the bank waft the watermen's voices, bidding us good night. Their day is done. They smoke a last pipe before turning in." "Every man for himself," said Mercier, "and God for one and all." "The town lies far behind," said Camier. "Little by little night overtakes us, blue-black. We splash through puddles left by the rain. It is no longer possible to advance. Retreat is equally out of the question." He added some moments later, "What are you musing on, Mercier?" "On the horror of existence, confusedly," said Mercier. "What about a drink?" said Camier. "I thought we had agreed to abstain," said Mercier, "except in the event of accident or indisposition. Does not that figure among our many conventions?" "I don't call drink," said Camier, "a quick nip to put some life in us." They stopped at the first pub. "No bikes here," said the publican. Perhaps, after all, he was a mere hireling. "And now?" said Camier. "We might chain it to a lamp-post," said Mercier. "That would give us more freedom," said Camier. He added, "of movement." In the end, they fell back on a railing. It came to the same. "And now?" said Mercier. "Back to no bikes," said Camier. "Never," said Mercier. "Never say that," said Camier. So they adjourned across the way. Sitting at the bar, they discoursed of this and that, brokenly, as was their custom. They spoke, fell silent, listened to each other, stopped listening, each as he fancied or as bidden from within. There were moments, minutes on end, when Camier lacked the strength to raise his glass to his mouth. Mercier was subject to the same failing. Then the less weak of the two gave the weaker to drink, inserting between his lips the rim of his glass. A press of somber, shaggy bulks hemmed them about, thicker and thicker as the hour wore on. From their conversation there emerged, in spite of all, among other points, the following. 1. It would be useless, nay madness, to venture any further for the moment. 2. They need only ask Helen to put them up for the night. 3. Nothing would prevent them from setting out on the morrow, hail, rain, or shine, at the crack of dawn. 4. They had nothing to reproach themselves with. 5. Did what they were looking for exist? 6. What were they looking for? 7. There was no hurry. 8. All their judgments relating to the expedition called for revision, in tranquility. 9. Only one thing mattered. Depart. 10. To hell with it anyway. Back in the street, they linked arms. After a few hundred yards, Mercier drew Camier's attention to the fact that they were not in step. You have your gait, said Camier. I have mine. I am not accusing anyone, said Mercier, but it's wearing. We advance in jerks. I prefer you to ask me straight out, said Camier. Straight out, plump and plain, either to let go your arm and move away, or else to fall in with your titubations. Camier, said Mercier, squeezing his arm. They came to a crossroads and stopped. Which way do we drag ourselves now? Said Camier. Our situation is no ordinary one, said Mercier. I mean in relation to Helen's home, if I know where we are. For these different ways all lead there with equal success. Then let us turn back, said Camier. And lose ground we can ill afford, said Mercier. We can't stay stuck here all night, said Camier, like a couple of clots. Let us toss our umbrella, said Mercier. It will fall in a certain way, according to laws of which we know nothing. Then all we have to do is press forward in the designated direction. The umbrella answered, left. It resembled a great wounded bird, a great bird of ill omen shot down by hunters and awaiting, quivering, the coup de grace. The likeness was striking. Camier picked it up and hung it from his pocket. It is not broken, I trust, said Mercier. Here their attention was drawn to a strange figure, that of a gentleman wearing, despite the rawness of the air, a simple frock coat and top hat. He seemed, for the moment, to be going their way, for their view was of his rear. His hands, in a gesture coquettishly demential, held high and wide apart the skirts of his cutaway. He advanced warily, with stiff and open tread. Do you feel like singing? Said Camier. Not to my knowledge, said Mercier. The rain was beginning again, but had it ever ceased? Let us make haste, said Camier. Why do you ask me that? Said Mercier. Camier seemed in no hurry to reply. Finally he said, I hear singing. They halted, the better to listen. I hear nothing, said Mercier. And yet you have good ears, said Camier, so far as I know. Very fair, said Mercier. Strange, said Camier. Do you hear it still? Said Mercier. For all the world a mixed choir, said Camier. Perhaps it's a delusion, said Mercier. Possibly, said Camier. Let's run, said Mercier. They ran some little way in the dark and wet, without meeting a soul. When they had done running, Mercier deplored the nice state, soaked to the buff, in which they would arrive at Helen's, to which in reply Camier described how they would immediately strip and put their things to dry, before the fire or in the hot cupboard with the boiler and hot water pipes. Come to think of it, said Mercier, why didn't we use our umbrella? Camier looked at the umbrella, now in his hand. He had placed it there that he might run more freely. We might have indeed, he said. Why burden oneself with an umbrella, said Mercier, and not put it up as required? Quite, said Camier. Put it up now, in the name of God, said Mercier. But Camier could not put it up. Give it here, said Mercier, but Mercier could not put it up either. This was the moment chosen by the rain, acting on behalf of the universal malignity, to come down in buckets. It's stuck, said Camier. Don't strain it, whatever you do. Mercier used a nasty expression. "Meaning me?" said Camier. With both hands, Mercier raised the umbrella high above his head and dashed it to the ground. He used another nasty expression, and, to crown all, lifting to the sky his convulsed and screaming face, he said, "As for thee, fuck thee." Decidedly, Mercier's grief, heroically contained since morning, could be no longer so. "Is it our little Omni you are trying to abuse?" said Camier. "You should know better. It's he, on the contrary, fucks thee. Omni, the all-unfuckable." "Kindly leave Mrs. Mercier outside this discussion," said Mercier. "The mind has snapped," said Camier. The first thing one noticed at Helen's was the carpet. "Will you look at that pile?" said Camier. "Prime moquette," said Mercier. "Unbelievable," said Camier. "You'd think you never saw it till now," said Mercier. "And you wallowing on it all these years." "I never did see it till now," said Camier. "And now I can't forget it." "So one says," said Mercier. If that evening the carpet in particular caught the eye, it was not alone in catching it, for a cockatoo caught it too. It clung shakily to its perch, hung from a corner of the ceiling, and dizzily rocked by a conflicting swing and spin. It was wide awake, in spite of the late hour. Feebly and fitfully its breast rose and fell, faint quiverings ruffled up the down at every expiration. Every now and then the beak would gape, and for what seemed whole seconds, fish-like, remain agape. Then the black spindle of the tongue was seen to stir. The eyes, averted from the light, filled with unspeakable bewilderment and distress, seemed all ears. Shivers of anguish rippled the plumage, blazing in ironic splendor. Beneath it, on the carpet, a great news sheet was spread. "That's my bed, and there's the couch," said Helen. "They're all yours," said Mercier. "For my part, I'll sleep with none." "A nice little suck-off," said Camier. "Not too prolonged, by all means, but nothing more." "Terminated," said Helen. "The nice little suck-offs, but nothing more." "I'll lie on the floor," said Mercier, "and wait for dawn. Scenes and faces will unfold before my gaze. The rain on the skylight sound like claws. A night rehearse its colors. The longing will take me to throw myself out of the window, but I'll master it." He repeated in a roar, "I'll master it." Back in the street, they wondered what they had done with the bicycle. The sack, too, had disappeared. "Did you see the Polly?" said Mercier. "Pretty thing," said Camier. "It groaned in the night," said Mercier. Camier questioned this. "It will haunt me till my dying day," said Mercier. "I didn't know she had one," said Camier. "What haunts me is the Kidderminster." "Nor I," said Mercier. "She says she's had it for years." "She's lying, of course," said Camier. It was still raining. They took shelter in an archway, not knowing where to go. "When exactly did you notice the sack was gone?" said Mercier. "This morning," said Camier, "when I went to get my sulphamides." "I see no sign of the umbrella," said Mercier. Camier inspected himself, stooping and spreading out his arms as if concerned with a button. "We must have left it at Helen's," he said. "My feeling is," said Mercier, "that if we don't leave this town today, we never shall. So let us think twice before we start trying to—" He almost said recoup. "What exactly was there in the sack?" said Camier. "Toilet requisites and necessaries," said Mercier. "Superfluous luxury," said Camier. "A few pairs of socks," said Mercier, "and one of drawers." "God," said Camier. "Some eatables," said Mercier. "Rotten ripe for the muck-heap," said Camier. "On condition we retrieve them," said Mercier. Let us board the first express southward bound, cried Camier. He added, more soberly, and so not to be tempted to get out at the nearest stop. And why south? Said Mercier, rather than north, or east, or west? I prefer south, said Camier. Is that sufficient ground? Said Mercier. It's the nearest terminus, said Camier. True, said Mercier. He went out into the street and looked up at the sky. A grey pall, look where he would. The sky is uniformly leaden, he said, resuming his place under the arch. We'll drown like rats without the umbrella. Camier criticized this simile. Like rats, said Mercier. Even if we had the umbrella, said Camier, we could not use it, for it is broken. What fresh extravagance is this? Said Mercier. We broke it yesterday, said Camier. Your idea. Mercier took his head between his hands. Little by little, the scene came back to him. Proudly, he drew himself up to his full height. Come, he said. Regrets are vain. We'll wear the raincoat, turn and turn about, said Camier. We'll be in the train, said Mercier, speeding south. Through the streaming panes, said Camier, we try to number the cows, shivering pitiably in the scant shelter of the hedges. Rooks take wing, all dripping and bedraggled, but gradually the day lifts and we arrive in the brilliant sunlight of a glorious winter's afternoon. It seems like Monaco. I don't seem to have eaten for 48 hours, said Mercier. And yet I am not hungry. One must eat, said Camier. He went on to compare the stomach with the bladder. Apropos, said Mercier, how is your cyst? Dormant, said Camier, but under the surface. Mischief is brewing. What will you do then? Said Mercier. I dread to think, said Camier. I could just manage a cream puff, said Mercier. Wait here, said Camier. No, no, cried Mercier. Don't leave me. Don't let us leave each other. Camier left the archway and began to cross the street. Mercier called him back, and an altercation ensued, too foolish to be recorded. So foolish was it. Another would take umbrage, said Camier. Not I, all things considered. For I say to myself, the hour is grave, and Mercier, well... He advanced towards Mercier, who promptly recoiled. I was only going to embrace you, said Camier. I'll do it some other time, when you're less yourself, if I think of it. He went out into the rain and disappeared. Alone in the archway, Mercier began pacing to and fro, deep in bitter thought. It was their first separation since the morning of the day before. Raising suddenly his eyes, as from a vision no longer to be borne, he saw two children, a little boy and a little girl, standing gazing at him. They wore little black oilskins with hoods, identical, and the boy had a little satchel on his back. They held each other by the hand. Papa, they said, with one voice, or nearly. Good evening, my children, said Mercier. Get along with you now. But they did not get along with them, no, but stood their ground, their little clasped hands lightly swinging back and forth. Finally, the little girl drew hers away and advanced towards him they had addressed as Papa. She stretched out her little arms towards him as if to invite a kiss, or at least a caress. The little boy followed suit, with visible misgiving. Mercier raised his foot and dashed it against the pavement. Be off with you, he cried. He bore down on them, wildly gesturing, and his face contorted. The children backed away to the sidewalk, and there stood still again. Fuck off out of here, screamed Mercier. He flew at them in a fury, and they took to their heels. but soon they halted and looked back. What they saw then must have impressed them strongly, for they ran on and bolted down the first side street. As for the unfortunate Mercier, satisfied, after a few minutes of fuming tenterhooks, that the danger was past, he returned, dripping, to the archway, and resumed his reflections, if not at the point where they had been interrupted, at least at one nearby. Mercier's reflections were peculiar in this, that the same swell and surge swept through them all, and cast the mind away, no matter where it embarked, on the same rocks invariably. They were perhaps not so much reflections as a dark torrent of brooding where past and future merged in a single flood and closed over a present forever absent. Ah, well. "Here," said Camier. "I hope you haven't been fretting." Mercier extracted the cake from its paper wrapping and placed it on the palm of his hand. He bent forward and down till his nose was almost touching it, and the eyes not far behind. He darted towards Camier, while still in this position, a sidelong look full of mistrust. "A cream horn," said Camier, "the best I could find." Mercier, still bent double, moved forward to the verge of the archway, where the light was better, and examined the cake again. "It's full of cream," said Camier. Mercier slowly clenched his fist, and the cake gushed between his fingers. The staring eyes filled with tears. Camier advanced to get a better view. The tears overflowed, all down the furrowed cheeks, and vanished in the beard. The face remained unmoved. The eyes, still streaming and no doubt blinded, seemed intent on some object stirring on the ground. "If you don't want it," said Camier, "you had better given it to a dog or to a child." "I'm in tears," said Mercier. "Don't intrude." When the flow stopped, Camier said, "Let me offer you our handkerchief." "There are days," said Mercier. "One is born every minute. Then the world is full of shitty little Merciers. It's hell. Oh, but to cease." "Enough," said Camier. "You look like a capital S. 90 if a day." "Would I were," said Mercier. He wiped his hand on the seat of his trousers. He said, "I'll start crawling any minute." "I'm off," said Camier. "Leaving me to my fate," said Mercier. "I knew it." "You know my little ways," said Camier. "No," said Mercier. "But I was counting on your affection to help me serve my time." "I can help you," said Camier. "I can't resurrect you." "Take me by the hand," said Mercier, "and lead me far away from here. I'll trot along at your side like a little puppy dog or a tiny tot. And the day will come—" A terrible screech of brakes rent the air, followed by a scream and a resounding crash. Mercier and Camier made a rush, after a moment's hesitation, for the open street, and were rewarded by the vision, soon hidden by a concourse of gapers, of a big fat woman writhing feebly on the ground. The disorder of her dress revealed an amazing mass of billowing underclothes, originally white in color. Her lifeblood, streaming from one or more wounds, had already reached the gutter. "Ah," said Mercier, "that's what I needed. I feel a new man already." He was, in fact, transfigured. "Let this be a lesson to us," said Camier. "Meaning," said Mercier. "Never to despair," said Camier, "or lose our faith in life." "Ah," said Mercier with relief. "I was afraid you meant something else." As they went their way, an ambulance passed, speeding towards the scene of the mishap. "I beg your pardon," said Camier. "A crying shame," said Mercier. "I don't follow you," said Camier. "A six-cylinder," said Mercier. "And what of it?" said Camier. "And they talk about the petrol shortage," said Mercier. There are perhaps more victims than one, said Camier. It might be an infant child, said Mercier, for all they care. The rain was falling gently, as from the fine rose of a watering pot. Mercier advanced with upturned face. Now and then he wiped it with his free hand. He had not had a wash for some time. Summary of 2 preceding chapters. 1. Outset. Meeting of Mercier and Camier. St. Ruth Square. The beach. The rain. The shelter. The dogs. Distress of Camier. The ranger. The bicycle. Words with the ranger. Mercier and Camier confer. Results of this conference. Bright too late. The bell. Mercier and Camier set out. 2. The town at twilight. Mercier and Camier on the way to the canal. Vision of the canal. The bicycle. First bar. Mercier and Camier confer. Results of this conference. Mercier and Camier on the way to Helen's. Doubts as to the way. The umbrella. The man in the frock coat. The rain. Camier hears singing. Mercier and Camier run. The umbrella. The downpour. Distress of Mercier. At Helen's. The cockatoo. The Kidderminster. The second day. The rain. Disappearance of sack, bicycle, and umbrella. The archway. Mercier and Camier confer. Results of this conference. Departure of Camier. Distress of Mercier. Mercier and the children. Return of Camier. The cream horn. Distress of Mercier. The fat woman. Mercier and Camier depart. Rain on Mercier's face.